Thanks everybody for coming. Some of you may not be familiar with the Political Affairs Committee. It's a committee of the council, and the committee is not always doing things every week or every month, but the task of the committee is to bring to our residents political issues that are of impact to us. So a couple of things I'm going to read from what our purpose and goal is as we submitted it to the council. By the way, the council has been run by Dorothy for a number of years. And I want to thank her for persistence and systematic doing these things. She asked me to help with that, and as it's not unusual, when you raise your hand, you want to help, the next thing you do, they say they put you in charge. So right now, officially, I'm the chair of the committee, but together with Dorothy. So I'm just going to read 3 sentences. The purpose of the committee is to facilitate visits of local elected officials to address issues of interest to Woodland Point residents, to arrange presentations by candidates for elected positions, and to inform our residents on the eve of such elections. And when there are contested efforts, this is one of them, we'll try to give equal time and opportunity to the candidates to speak and also to talk to among both of them. Unfortunately, because of the timing of this event, we may have Gary first and then Sarahana hopefully come and overlap a little bit. And the third goal is to provide information about propositions that sometimes are coming to a vote that may be of effect of us to the residents. So, having said that, basically, I'm just going to go over a couple of mechanics. If people want to, as William said, we will give you some time to just do an opening statement in around 10 minutes. Then we will have questions from the audience. If somebody wants to raise your hand, we'll bring you the mic. Speak clearly into the mic because it's going to be recorded. If you don't hear it through the mics, it's not recorded. And the third thing, if you prefer not to speak up, but you want to write a question, we will have you raise your hand and you will get a little card. You can write it at your leisure. Make sure that we get it here. William will handle this. Okay? Any questions about this?
Turn off cell phones.
No?
Turn off
William, are you here? Sorry.
Since Yaakov has said everything I was going to say, but since he also likes to run around with the microphone, I will, as he says, call on people. And again, it's important for those of you who don't like to get up and speak at public gatherings. We have cards and we have pencils. And Ralph, are you gonna?
No, turn these things on.
Okay, so that people can write down their questions and I will read them. But let's begin.
Off the phones. Turn the phones off.
Oh, yes. We should all turn our phones off, which I shall also do. Okay. I will not introduce our guests. They will introduce themselves, talk about their background, and what they will do should they be elected, if they should be the nominee and then be elected to office.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. My name is Gabby Madden, and I am one of the candidates looking to serve District 103 in the New York State Assembly. And Assembly District 103 is comprised of 2 counties, Ulster and Northern Dutchess, 14 municipalities, consisting of just over 130,000 constituents. And so I'm vying for the Democratic line so I can advance to the general election in November. So a little bit about me. I've been working in the state legislature for about 6 years now, serving as a chief of staff and a deputy chief of staff in both the New York State Assembly as well as the New York State Senate. I got into public service immediately after college. I had graduated in 2018, and I took a position in the office of Assemblymember Kevin Cahill. Again, this was in 2018, and I was serving as an office assistant, working primarily on constituent services, which is really what hooked me on public service. I loved navigating state law and advocating for my constituents and the community that I was raised in. So backtracking just a little bit, I was born and raised in Kingston, New York. I'm 28 years old. I graduated from Kingston High School, attended SUNY Ulster Community College, before going on to my 4-year university at Marymount Manhattan College, where I studied communications with a minor in journalism. I thought I was going to go into investigative journalism. And so then immediately after graduating in 2018, like I said, I started with Assemblymember Kevin Cahill's office. I became his clerk to the New York State Insurance Committee, where I got to work on some really important pieces of legislation, such as the Reproductive Health Act, which helped to codify Roe v. Wade in New York State, as well as the Comprehensive Contraceptive Coverage Act, which provided for insurance coverage for up to 12 months of birth control. And so those were two really exciting bills I got to work on as a young woman within the state legislature, again serving as clerk to the Insurance Committee. I then went on to become his chief of staff, so I was handling both legislative operations as well as district office operations. I was then offered a position with Senator James Skoufis, who represents Orange County, just south of here, and I served as his deputy chief of staff until the end of 2023, where I left that job to run for this position. You can't seek a position with the New York State Legislature while holding that appointed title as Deputy Chief of Staff. So with Senator Skoufis, though, it was really a great experience. He's a very hands-on representative. He's also chair of the Investigations and Government Operations Committee. So I was able to be hands-on in an investigation into utilities statewide with a focus on Central Hudson, which I know is a topic of interest. And we were able to put out a legislative report with a lot of policy proposals that would address the issues that we experience here in Central Hudson. And so in addition to that investigative arm, I was also able to work on the gas tax holiday, which set a moratorium at the gas pumps for the year of 2022 into 2023, when the conflict had occurred over in Ukraine and those gas prices surged. That was a really important bill that saved nearly $600 million for New Yorkers at the pump. So that's some of the more recent legislation that I've worked on, again, with Senator James Skoufis. And then with Assemblymember Cahill's office, I helped pass the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is one of the most progressive climate change related measures in all of the nation. And so that was really important. And we have some really stringent goals that we have to meet under the CLCPA. And we need to make sure that we have effective leadership if we're actually going to meet those goals. So in addition to the CLCPA, I've worked on a lot of environmental measures in addition to insurance measures. I know that that's going to probably be a topic of interest for you folks when we do open it up to questions. But this past 6 years has really positioned me well to deliver for my community, the community that helped to raise me, the community that I love, that all of my family, my entire life is within Ulster and Dutchess counties. So this community means a lot to me. And the reason that I decided to run was because I was seeing a vacancy the past 2 years. We weren't seeing our tax dollars come back to our district like we typically do. We usually get millions and millions of dollars back to our district to help assist with infrastructure improvements, our school district funding, different grant projects within the area that help to keep our local taxes low. I also wasn't seeing any policy being advanced within the state legislature. So there wasn't any new legislation being authored or introduced on behalf of our district. And then I was also getting phone calls from constituents back in our community, along with library directors and nonprofit directors who were unable to get in touch with their representative, who was our current incumbent. And so it was really one red flag after the next that really pushed me to run. I knew that I had the tools, I knew I had the skill set to really perform for this community that I'm very passionate about. This is the job that I love to do. I love finding creative solutions to really problem solve on behalf of our constituency. And so knowing that I had those tools and had that skill set and a strong understanding of this community, again, that I was raised in, I knew that I had to step up, and it felt like a responsibility, honestly. And so that's why I decided to run. I didn't think I'd ever actually run to be an elected official myself. I really enjoy doing the work behind the scenes, getting the job done, doing the nitty gritty. And that was, something I was able to achieve as a chief of staff. But knowing that the need was here, knowing that I had the tools and that I love this community, and knowing what we deserve in this community as well, that's why I stepped up to run. And so it's been a great campaign. Obviously, we're in the final few weeks now. June 25th is the primary election date. Early voting begins June 15th. And my key priorities within this race are housing, utilities, and healthcare with a focus of mental health. Those are just 3 platforms though. Your legislators are, or they should be working on a variety of different initiatives. We should walk and chew gum at the same time. So in addition to all that community affairs work and constituent service work that we're doing, we should be advancing policy across all industries in Albany. And so this is something that I'm very familiar with, again, based on my experience, and something that I'm really eager to build upon. So making sure that we're expanding universal preschool, for example, within New York State, something that was reserved only for New York City residents previously. That's something that I had spearheaded in Skoufis's office, who introduced that measure, and now making sure that it's actually rolled out as it was intended. That's the other half of the job of a state legislature. You advance these bills, they get enacted into law, but you want to make sure that they're actually rolled out and enforced as they were intended, and actually working to provide solutions to the issues as they were proposed. And so, just like I mentioned with the CLCPA, a lot of those initiatives within, it takes strong leadership to actually roll out that plan and make sure that it's effective. Same with universal preschool. We have this statewide new initiative, but getting it rolled out within our school districts has been problematic. And so that's where I come through to be that lifeline between our state entities and our community. And that's really the role of an assembly person, is to be that advocate, to be that watchdog, to make sure that we're serving as your liaison when it comes to the tax and finance department, or the ag and markets department, Department of Health, Department of Financial Services for insurance matters. And so making sure that you have a strong district office that can really relay those messages from your constituents to problem solve on their behalf. And then, leveraging those state enforcement powers to benefit that of your community is so crucial. And so between bringing tax dollars back home, providing that regulatory relief, advancing policy specific to the needs of Ulster and Northern Dutchess County, that's where I come through. That's really where my expertise lies. And I think that my understanding of the mechanics and the ins and outs of the legislative process and state government overall is going to position me very well to really prove to you all that I can deliver the benefits, deliver the results. And enough with the rhetoric, now it's time to really get tangible relief for our communities. Did I surpass 10 minutes there?
You were just.
Okay.
The second candidate has been delayed. She's on her way. And so we will proceed with questions to Gavi, and then when the other candidate comes, she will also make a similar presentation about herself, her goals, her achievements, as Gavi has done so well. Is there anybody who has a question that they would like to write down? Ralph is holding up papers.
To anybody that would rather write
Ralph,
down.
there are hands in the air. Hold your hand up, and
I'll give you one question to start off with.
Sounds great.
They give it to the questions to.
there's another hand in back, and someone in the back.
That's all.
You're gonna ask for talking questions. You're gonna ask for talking questions.
One.
You're gonna ask for talking
You need pencil?
questions.
Yes, I will.
Anybody else over here? Anybody else back here?
Okay, there may be other people who would like to write questions as they listen to the questions and answers that people may wish, people here may want to ask questions verbally, and the floor is now open for that. Yakov, would you share?
I did raise my hand.
Oh,
Question?
the cards need to be collected now that the questions have been cleared.
Cards ready?
Thank you for coming
Where's your card?
and speaking to us. Many people here are interested in the MAID
Any other cards?
medical assisted. Yes, it is. It's, yes.
Can people hear the question?
No.
No, I can't hear you.
All right, can you hear it now?
Better.
Okay. It's, you have to put it right up to your lips, actually. Many people here have been talking about the MAID Act, Medical Assisted in Dying Act, and so it's a complicated issue. So I wonder if you might state what your position is and why you think it's as complicated and where you'd like to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a bill that I had worked on when I was serving in Cahill's office, because he was the chair of the insurance committee, and actually he was not supportive of that bill. He had some concerns about unintended consequences that could come as a result of that bill being enacted with regard to, children that are treating their parents or mishaps within the healthcare realm that could lead to medical aid in dying for the wrong causes. So I think that I've met with enough advocacy groups to problem solve through some of those unintended consequences. I would be supportive of the Medical Aid in Dying Act. I think that it's important that we give that choice when we're talking about choice so much within New York State and the United States overall. I think that that's an important, choice that our seniors should be able to make proudly. And so that's a bill that I would support. However, I know that it has been held up within the New York State Senate. So while it advances in one house of the legislature, which is the Assembly House, it's important that we find a strong carrier for the bill that's going to shepherd it through that committee process in the Senate House. The only way that we're going to be able to enact a bill into law and actually get it passed by both houses if it gets carried by a Senate sponsor. And so despite it passing the Assembly this year, it did not pass to a floor vote in the state Senate, and so making sure you're working with those Senate colleagues is crucial here. There's no point of introducing a measure that doesn't have a Senate companion bill, or else it's never going to have a chance to actually advance into law. So that's where, that working with your colleagues within the Senate majority is crucial. And so that can be said for your colleagues within the state assembly as well, with those Democrats, your Senate colleagues, your federal counterparts, as well as your municipal counterparts. That's something I'm really proud of. I've established great relationships with all of those elected leaders, whether it's working on their campaigns or working on policy on the government side. And so I'm really excited to hit the ground running, knowing that I have strong carriers within the state Senate to introduce my companion bills in the state assembly. And that would be the case for the medical aid and dying bill for sure.
We will alternate between people who want to ask questions verbally and the written questions that have been submitted. The first one on the pile is, are any political districts in New York State gerrymandered? If yes, by whom? And if so, what can be done about it?
Yeah, so the redistricting process occurs every 10 years when we do our census. And so the last redistricting process that we had experienced was extremely stressful. That's coming from the staff perspective of someone that had to do the petition collections and whatnot in a district that got changed overnight. And so we know that the Democratic majority had an opportunity to put forth some really sound maps that were not gerrymandered. Unfortunately, there were issues within those existing maps, the first draft that they had put out, and that led to the independent redistricting committee taking control over the drawing of those new maps after the Democrats had introduced their drafts. And so right now, as it stands, these maps are permanent. The maps for both the Senate, Assembly, as well as Congressional are permanent. Those for Assembly and Congressional did have an amendment that was made last year, but that's been finalized. And so as it stands, I think there might be some issues with regard to the congressional districts where you see some of them are a long strip. So you're going from somewhere very north to somewhere very south in New York State, where obviously they experience a lot of different issues, rural versus urban demographic makeups, and so that can be very challenging. And that's my concern when I think gerrymandering. It's just the issues that the constituents will experience when they're seeking the services of their state electeds. And so I think that it's important that come the next census and the next redistricting process, that Democrats not only have that majority control, which fingers crossed they will. But that also we're making sure that we're being preemptive within those steps and making sure that we're drafting these maps in advance with plenty of time to review with our fellow Democratic colleagues. But I think that the Democrats have done a great job with the redistricting process. And so I feel confident in the maps that are set forth now. And there was only a minor change, just so that you folks know, with regard to the Assembly District. It's for the most part the same. We still have Red Hook and Rhinebeck over in northern Dutchess County. We have taken on Saugerties as well as Olive. We lost Marlboro, but the district overall is pretty much the same, so.
Does anybody else want to ask a verbal question? Yakov will give you the microphone.
I have a couple questions, but first of all, it's wonderful having someone from our own area looking to run and help us. But I have some major questions about your financial support for your campaign, where the majority of it is money coming from the east end of Long Island. These aren't your constituents. What's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I know that there's been a lot of noise about that. So actually the majority of my contributions are in-district contributions. So what was pulled on a recent press article was a snapshot of 10 contributions from each candidate. And so that focus was mainly individuals that were outside of this assembly district, some of whom I do know that have second homes here, some of whom I've worked previously within the state legislature, but the majority of my contributions, percentage-wise, do come within the assembly district, which I think is really important to note. The other piece to this is that I'm doing the public matching funds program. This is the first year that that's been enacted. And so the public matching funds program allows for tremendous transparency, which is great. It's a grassroots initiative to help new candidates to really fundraise and bolster that. And so with that, I've been able to fundraise a lot more because especially my generation can only contribute so much with regard to fundraising. So I've been able to take advantage and max out the full amount that I'm eligible for in publicly matched state funds. That's your tax dollars, by the way. I know a lot of folks probably weren't aware of that, but the Public Matching Fund Program takes contribution and matches it up to 12-to-1 by New York State Comptroller using tax dollars. And again, this was something newly enacted this year. I personally think it should have been a ballot proposition, being that it's using taxpayer dollars, but anyway. And so that is a tremendous amount of transparency, a lot of paperwork and filing required so that it is all listed on the Board of Elections website. The contributions that I am receiving, though, that aren't necessarily from within district, I think speak to some of the positions that my opponent has taken publicly. I know that I have a lot of support from individuals within the Jewish community, and I think that that is a result of remarks that were made immediately following what happened on October 7th of last year, which left a lot of the Jewish community kind of feeling in the dark with regard to their representative. And so that's really...
Gabby, may I interrupt to say, any comments that you wish to make about your opponent, I think should wait until she shows up so she can hear them and perhaps respond. So.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So with regard, though, to those contributions, again, I think that that's a result of the stances of, you know, my opponent. I don't mean to make a remark that involves her, but that's really the only thing that I can point to. Aside from that, it's been great getting a lot of, again, majority in district contributions, and that's ranging from $5 to $250. So those are somewhat small amounts when you compare it to larger donor contributions. Coming into this race, I knew I was going to have to be very competitive in fundraising. In 2022, the opponent's side had raised nearly $1 million for their campaign, and that's a lot of money. As a first-time candidate, I knew it was going to be tough to fundraise, and so I knew I was going to have to accept contributions from LLCs, for example, and I know that that's something that gets a bad rap, but LLCs can contribute a smaller dollar amount than an individual can at the end of the year, so I think there's some misunderstanding with regard to those contributions as well. But that speaks a lot to my contributions, but I do think that newspaper article really was just a snapshot. I think that's what you're referencing, was really just a snapshot of those 10 and 10, and that speaks so little to the overall picture of contributions.
The question here is, how to manage the homeless. The questioner wanted to know about creating new housing, but also how we deal with the homeless in our community.
Absolutely. So I think that the homelessness issue stems a lot from mental health. We see mental health being the core of so many of these issues we're experiencing throughout New York State. And so when we talk about homelessness, I can't help but talk about that mental health component. And so one of my biggest initiatives is returning the mental health and detox beds to the Mary's Ave campus in Kingston that we lost during COVID. So when COVID had struck, they took 60 beds from the Mary's Ave campus, which were designated for recovery and detox and mental health services. They took those beds offline to reserve the healthcare facility for COVID purposes in case they needed additional room for COVID patients. It never ended up being utilized, and even after the state of emergency was lifted, those 60 beds did not return to the Mary's Ave campus. This is actually illegal. The Mary's Ave campus has to abide by what's called a certificate of need, commonly referred to as a CON. And so this certificate of need is given out by Department of Health. It's regulated and enforced by Department of Health as well. And so by the healthcare facility not abiding by that certificate of need, they're actually breaking the law. And so there's enforcement measures that Department of Health can take to ensure that they are abiding that certificate of need. And this has been experienced in other hospital facilities throughout the state, but unfortunately not right here at home. And so what I would be doing is, again, leveraging Department of Health, that enforcement authority, to make sure that they are levying fines in accordance with breaking that certificate of need so that we get those beds back online. If Health Alliance / WMC, this big box hospital facility, if they're going to, take these beds offline and not abide by that certificate of need, then they should be levied fines just as intended within our state health law. And that's the enforcement powers of Department of Health, but you need effective leadership that's going to hold them accountable. Half my job is holding government accountable to my community. And so that's how I would be returning those detox beds back to the Mary's Ave campus, making sure that certificate of need is fulfilled and making sure we're using those enforcement powers as necessary. That's one way to combat the mental health issue, which would lend itself to this homelessness crisis that we're experiencing. The homelessness crisis is also a result of a lack of housing stock. And a lack of affordable housing stock. So we need additional housing across the board, senior housing, workforce housing, affordable housing. And so I have a few different solutions to implement as a multi-pronged approach to really solving this massive issue. And this is not unique to Ulster and Northern Dutchess, it is statewide, but the solutions that I bring on behalf of my district are specific to my district. So some unique solutions include items specific to manufactured homes, for example. So manufactured homes or mobile homes. In Ulster and Dutchess County, we have the highest rate of manufactured homes than that of the rest of New York State. So how do we better protect those tenants of manufactured homes? Those developments are ripe for new developers to come in and buy up and build new expensive housing on because they already have water and septic established. So we want to better protect the tenants of those manufactured homes by allowing for a right of first refusal so that they can join together and buy that manufactured home spot before a developer can come in and swoop it away from them. That's a unique solution to a unique issue specific to our district. Oftentimes when the budget is negotiated and legislative session is underway, we hear a lot about these massive legislative proposals to address housing statewide, which is great, and that's something that we should be working towards as a long-term goal. But we need to make sure that we're also prioritizing solutions that are going to be effective immediately and providing immediate relief. And that's where those more niche and unique solutions come into play, just like I had spoken about the manufactured homes. Another unique solution that I'd like to bolster here in Ulster and Northern Dutchess County is accessory dwelling units. So New York State allows for accessory dwelling units to be implemented on homes if it's enacted locally by a municipality. Accessory dwelling units are great because they allow for an additional funding stream to, let's say, our seniors who want to stay in their houses. Now we have an additional funding stream coming in to support those payments while also adding additional rental stock for tenants. So I'm very supportive of accessory dwelling units. But I've talked to a lot of mayors and supervisors about the issues they experience when implementing the accessory dwelling unit law locally. they don't have the resources necessary for their building codes and zoning departments to actually roll out these ADUs so that they can be effective and in turn maximizing the impact of this legislation. And so by securing additional funding within the state budget to support our building codes and zoning enforcement, we would be able to streamline that process and get those ADUs online to help provide solutions for this housing crisis we're experiencing. So those are, again, two unique solutions to the housing crisis specific in Ulster and Northern Dutchess with a mental health component with regard to getting those detox beds back. And that's how I would address the homelessness issue. That's how I would start to address the homelessness issue. There's still a lot of work to be done there.
Does anyone else have a question out there?
What is your take on the mega warehouse that's been proposed on Route 32 that would require the massive trucks coming off the thruway right here in New Paltz, going past the high school to get to 32 into our neighborhoods?
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with this project. I actually went to a meeting where the community and residents came together from both Plattekill, Gardner, and New Paltz to discuss this issue and to set forth some solutions on a community level, so joining together to provide that advocacy. And so while I was there, I shared some information that is helpful for dealing with these new developments, something I'm very familiar with. In my past position working in Senator Skoufis's office, we were successful in getting some bad actor developers shut down by levying the highest fines in DEC history for their acting without the necessary permits. And so a lot of experience there that I was excited to share with these folks within the town of Gardner. And so luckily, this proposal is going to be on a designated agriculture district, which expands what we can leverage from a state regulatory authority in order to get this shut down. So agriculture districts within New York State allow for additional protections whenever a new development is coming or being proposed by, put forward in front of a town planning board, for example. And so we're gonna leverage, again, the enforcement powers from Ag and Markets, a New York State agency, as well as that of Department of Transportation, because there's gonna be traffic concerns surrounding that new development. We're concerned about the wildlife over there and the protected wetlands, so that's where we tap into Department of Environmental Conservation to leverage their enforcement powers to get this proposal shut down. So if you're looking for an overall statement, I'm opposed to it because the community is opposed to it, and that's what matters most to me at the end of the day. And so that's my job then, to find ways to get this shut down on behalf of my community. So I looked at the state entities that I can utilize in order to do that. I mentioned Department of Environmental Conservation. We can levy fines with regard to the protected wetlands, and I believe there's also a protected bat species. And then also working with Ag and Markets to leverage their enforcement to ensure that this development doesn't go through, because it is, again, on a protected agriculture district.
Okay, 3 of the questions that were written are basically the same question, but I see our second speaker is here, so I will hold up on this until she speaks. Welcome, and let me explain what's happened since you were delayed. Gabi has presented, and we hope you will do the same, about her background, as you will explain about your background, what the issues that have been important to you as the incumbent, what you have done as a legislator, and what you will do, and the issues that you will be most concerned with should you be the nominee and be elected. And then we have given her 10 minutes or as much of that as you need, and then we will take questions from the audience, and that we're dividing it between questions people will give verbally, and some people are shyer and will write them down, and I will read them, and if they're directed to one of you or both of you, as it turns out. But first, please introduce yourself along the lines we've talked about. Yeah. you'll have more time at the end, stop a bit.
Great, so 10 minutes, right? That's what you said? I have 10 minutes? All right. So my name is Sarah Hannah Shrestha. Last time I was here on a Zoom because I had COVID. I recognize this room from the screen. But I'm the current assembly member representing District 103, which is 14 localities in Mid-Hudson Valley. So I grew up, I was born and raised in Nepal, which is a long ways from here. And I am the eldest child, which has great significances to my personality. And I was born to parents who were very young at the time. My dad was 20 years old and my mom was 19 years old. And they have put a lot of effort into making sure that I can go to a good school, get education, get all the books that I want, all the color pencils and pens that I want. So that's how I ended up in New York. I was going to a school where an American teacher from Colorado, Denver, was there teaching in Nepal. And as a Nepali, it is very difficult to come to the United States. Most people cannot come here for college because they cannot get a visa and so on. So I had been admitted to a school, New York Institute of Technology, but I did not have the student loan. And when my professor volunteered to be the guarantor of my student loan, I was able to come and go to school in New York. So when I was growing up in Nepal, I grew up in a very politically charged time. Until I was 8 or 9 years old, we did not have democracy, and around the time I was born, which is 1981, there had been one failed attempt at democracy already. So I was about 8 or 9 years old when the second and the successful attempt happened. But as soon as we got democracy, because Nepal is a very ethnically diverse country, it's a tiny country between Tibet and India, but we have so many ethnicities, castes, we have over 200 languages. Many people had not even been to other parts of the country because there were no roads. People had to be carried on backs for 3 days to go to a hospital. There was extreme inequity in terms of having access to public infrastructure, having access to basic needs, which had brewed a lot of discontent that was capitalized upon by some people in power. And immediately after we had a democracy, we had a 10-year civil war that was quite violent. So when people ask me, how did you get into politics? I feel like, well, it was always in front of me. In fact, it was undeniable. And as an adult, when I went back to some of the very rural parts of the country where this war began, I could see why, because they had nothing. And as we went into the deepest part of the country, you could see that there was a road being built with forced labor, basically. And wherever the road was hitting, the villages were transforming because they had previously been disconnected from everything else. So that has really shaped my belief in, first, equity, right? Not leaving people out, even in such a small country, there was such a gap. And the second is just this deep and fundamental commitment that public infrastructure demands of us, public goods, and how we cannot really take them for granted. Whether we talk about public schools, or whether we talk about roads, or whether we talk about energy or healthcare system, all of the conversations were happening at the state level really is about what should be a public good and what should be for profit. Where do we draw the line? So once I came to New York and I became involved in state level politics, I really got involved in the energy conversation as somebody who's very concerned about the climate, having grown up in the global south, where, by the way, glaciers are melting at a rapid pace, and also knowing that the world is so deeply connected that there is no such thing as anything that is not our problem, because we are losing farmable land in places like Pakistan and places like India and places like Latin America, and there's going to be a huge displacement. We're going to have to figure all of this out altogether. But the fascinating thing is the role New York can play in all of this, which I believe is why everybody is very interested in our state politics, all of my colleagues that are trying to make a difference. Because we are in a position first to significantly improve the lives of New Yorkers in a way that really creates the model for what everybody else can do. Sometimes we have state legislators that visit us from Tennessee or from Wisconsin, and they're like, guys, please do this so that if you do it, we can do it as well. We need you to lead, So the 4 top crises that I have identified as my priorities, first is healthcare. Not only the fact that 30% of hospitals right now are somewhat financially unstable and need to switch to a different mechanism for funding, but the fact that we don't have a long-term care plan or a home care solution for the population that is aging. Most doors that I knock, when I say, most people don't have a plan for long-term care, everybody says I'm one of those people. So we have to sort that out. The second thing is housing. People are really having a hard time staying here, and a trend that I have noticed that turns out to be true 90% of the time is kids who moved out to go to school or to work, now they want to come back. They're moving in with their parents because there's no such thing as your first starter home. Maybe it's going to be $4,000K, which is already $400K, which is already a lot. And then where are you going to get the money to fix it up? Where is the time? Who's going to go to work? Who's going to take care of the child, right? So it's very, very difficult. And renting is difficult as well. Most people I know in Kingston, when they lose their lease, they move to Newburgh. And people who voted for me have already moved to Newburgh because that's how rapid the displacement is. We passed a few things in the budget this year, but it's not going to be enough, so we have further plans on building permanently affordable and high quality homes the way we used to in the 70s already, actually, under Governor Rockefeller, but we paused it, so we want to revive. We had a proto-social housing authority back then that built 33,000 homes in 5 years, and we haven't seen that kind of home availability in New York in a while, and these are homes for people, not for developers, not for luxury tenants. The third thing, the energy sector, we are really concerned that the PSC is going to grant rate increases to pretty much any utility that asks for it, because our utility regulation system itself is not designed to protect ratepayers. It is primarily designed to protect shareholders, because we have about 7 utilities in the state that are corporate monopolies that have their own service territory, and they have a lot of authority to do whatever they want, and they also have a perverse incentive to spend money on unnecessary capital projects through which they can increase their return on equity, which is how they increase their rates. So we are very concerned about holding Central Hudson accountable in an ecosystem where the laws themselves are skewed in their favor. So as legislators, we try to chip away at the laws, but it's really not fast enough for people who are feeling the impacts right now. Central Hudson has started termination notices, and we've already heard from a tenant whose account was shut off, and because of that, the landlord is saying that they can be evicted because they had their account turned off, and that was their responsibility to not have done so. The fourth thing, this is my second year with the second budget, and I'm really tired of public schools and state universities having to beg for money every year. Last year, we fully funded the foundation aid for the first time for public schools, and before they could even take advantage of that, this year the governor started the year by proposing deep cuts to school aid, including 4 school districts in our assembly district. And before we even passed our final budget, they had already cut people because their budget is not on the same timeline as ours. So just based on what they were hearing, they had already made cuts, and people have to be let go. And SUNY New Paltz has an $8 million deficit. There should be no reason that it has an $8 million deficit, and there are 19 comprehensive colleges altogether that have those deficits. And when we have anchor institutions like SUNY New Paltz, we should really be taking advantage of turning them into community institutions that can have a strong community around it. And everybody loves SUNY New Paltz. Almost everybody I know in New Paltz has one connection or the other to the school. The faculty is great. Everybody's trying hard to be the best, but the state is really letting them down in terms of continued divestment if you adjust for inflation over the years. So those are really the top 4 areas that I am focusing on, but there's also labor, worker rights, criminal justice reform. It's really a million priorities at a time, which is why, I feel like the last 2 years have been, I don't know, an hour, a blur. Lots of things have happened, but there are such great opportunities in Albany to take advantage of with our Democratic supermajority that it's just, you just cannot give up on those opportunities because they're right there, they're right within our reach, and every year we make progress, but we need to also speed up a few things, especially on the climate and housing front. Thank you.
Thank you. Three of the written questions are essentially the same question, and they touch on some of the things that have been said, and they show concern certainly in this community. What are your feelings on the right to die legislation? Will you push MAID legislation out of committee? Current legislation being held up, which you consider important, how would you work to pass? And in parentheses again, medical aid in dying is the concern. So why don't we start with Gabby and then move on to Sarah?
Yeah, I think I already answered that question.
Right. Do you have anything else you want to
I
add?
think I'm okay with
Yes, I thought so too.
I have lots to say on this bill. So Medical Aid in Dying Act. So I've been supporting this bill since day one because of, I feel like I sit down all the time. But I will sit down, sure. So I've been supporting it since day one for 2 reasons. Obviously, I heard from people in this district on it right away, and many people I truly consider my friends and who are really afraid of their experience in dying and who have had to see people they love have terrible experiences. But when I asked my fellow assembly member, Farah Sufran Forrest, who is a nurse, tell me why you support this bill. And as a nurse, she said, Sarahana, the thing is, when people have this choice, they don't even use it, but they want to have this choice because it brings them control, it empowers them, it brings them comfort. And to me, that was such an important way to look at this bill. So, this bill is currently carried by Assembly Member Amy Paulin, and every time I run into her in the hallway, we're talking about, we're tallying the votes. Where are we at, right? Who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to flip? So she is very good at this, and she's pushing this bill quite a bit, and I've been helping her just talking to whoever is having reservations, because even some people who put their name on the bill are scared if it has unintended consequences. So we've really been trying to have one-on-one conversations, and we've able to move a lot of people in the assembly to support this bill and feel comfortable with a yes. Now here's where we left off, because the session just ended Saturday morning at 7:17 a.m. And I talked to Amy Paulin before I left. Amy, where are we at? So we have the votes in the assembly. We've never had the votes in the assembly. We've moved a lot of people. We have about 84 pledged yes votes, which is a great shape to be in. We don't have the votes in the Senate. So when we go back, that's what we're gonna work on, getting the senators on board. And the culture in the Senate and the Assembly is quite different because there's very few of them. So the dynamic is very different because each senator holds a lot more weight and power to be on that bill.
Okay, this is a question to both candidates. And what is your position? New York State has adopted, they did adopt this in 2022, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, where one of the 20+ examples that are in the document classifies Zionism criticism or any criticizing of Zionism or Israeli policies as anti-Semitism. people doing business with New York State are required to sign this agreement that they agree to this definition of anti-Semitism and will not be anti-Semitic given the definition. The questioner wants to know what each of the speakers, what their opinion is of this legislation. Gabby, why don't we start with you?
Thank you so much. So this is obviously a sensitive topic right here, and we want to be really careful when it comes to any type of anti-Semitism within this district, especially given the recent incidents that we've had in Ulster and Northern Dutchess County. And so I think that it's important that we are supporting our Jewish communities. I would be supportive of that measure, but I am a little bit hesitant with regard to free speech restrictions. So I think that free speech needs to still be upheld within New York State, and that, you know, criticizing another country's government necessarily is not a form of anti-Semitism. So that is a little bit alarming. But with regard to the rest of the contents of that bill, I would be supportive, especially given the fragile state that New York State is in right now, and facing a lot of anti-Semitic acts.
Sarah Hunter?
So first of all, I think it's really, really important to take very clear positions on any form of hatred, any form of prejudice, because, you know, fascism is right at our doors. That's a reality of this country right now. And I am often surprised by some of the people who just say out loud, and having never expected that they would say something like that, you know, in front of another person. So I agree with Gabby that, you know, one of the reasons I'm concerned about the rise in anti-Semitism is I don't want people to equate the actions of a government with the actions of a whole people. When Trump was very bad, I don't want that assigned necessarily to all Americans. You know, we are not responsible for his actions. So I am alarmed both by the rise in anti-Semitism as well as Islamophobia, because what happens is when there are big events that fuel division, it is very easy to rile people up along the lines of hatred. So my approach has been to have one-on-one conversation with smaller groups, because we really do need to heal, and we need to heal despite all of the chaos that is going all around us. And I think, you know, especially with my Jewish constituents who are concerned about the conflation between Israel's actions, and they feel like, you know, they should not be held responsible. And, you know, having seen the poster that went up on the synagogue in Kingston and talked to the rabbis there, I think that as people who have a platform such as, elected officials, I think we can help the conversation be on the side of let's calm down and really look at what we all want, because at the end of the day, I think what we all want is peace, and for everyone to have a place that they can feel safe in. So that's a very long way to say that I think that it's not helpful to define anti-Semitism that way, in a way that is being enforced, because I think it's going to work against, not having the Jewish New York contingency have to bear the responsibility of somebody that they really have no control over.
Thank you. We said we would end at 4, and we will, it being 4, but I hope you've heard each of the candidates, gotten a very good idea of who they are, what their values are, and who you might want to vote for in the primary election coming up. So let's end by thanking our 2 visitors for their participation today.
This is on the poster, it's all posted.
We also have early voting information in case anyone wants to just get familiar with early voting polling places and the dates and whatnot. We have some documents.
Yeah. Just for people, just to answer your question, there is a poster next to the mailing room about the primaries, the upcoming primaries, about people registering to vote, whatever vote they want to cast, and to be able to either vote by absentee ballot, meaning that they can send their vote, they don't have to move from their chair, or to actually go there, and there will be a van transportation both for the pre-election day twice, and for election day for the third time. So it's all on the poster next to the mailing room, and I hope people that receive emails will also get the same information via email. I mean, unfortunately, it couldn't be done over the weekend, but it's going to come today or tomorrow. Okay? And if people have questions, please direct them to either the Board of Election, the number is there, or you can call Dorothy or myself to try to help you out. And yeah, you have another?
Where's the early election going to be held?
But that, it's all posted. It's all posted. The primary, the early vote place is in at the community center of Route 32 North, and the actual voting day is by the church, by the Reformed Church. You go in and to the left. It's all posted in the bulletin board. Any other technical questions? Yes, I mean, I would suggest, although officially we decide to close.
Yes, as promised, the meeting is over, but if the candidates have a bit of time, perhaps they would hang around a bit and people might discuss issues with them further. Thank you all for coming. Vivian?
I know that Gabby has another appointment. Is that in 5 o'clock? So just be honest with us how much you want.
Thank you, I appreciate it, I
Okay.
appreciate that. I'll be here for at least a few minutes to
Yeah,
answer any
okay.
questions.
And Sarah Hannah, we would welcome you to stay longer.
Yeah, I thought I was supposed to be here at 4, so I have plenty of time now that I'm here to say.
Okay, thank you all, and if people would like to speak to the candidates, please come up and do so.